Hello. Hello. Hi. Happy International Women's Day. That was a total accident of scheduling this.
Was it an accident or was it divine
Yes.
orchestration?
Yes, indeed. Welcome. Thank you so much for taking time out of your lives to be here. I know that some of you are skipping shifts at work that you need to pay the bills. I know that some of you are paying your part-time employees to come in today and manage your small businesses so that every motherfucker in your crew could roll up in here. Hi, Seed to Star. Hi, Stillwells. Thank you so much for making the effort on my behalf. Y'all are my family. I recognize so many of you in the audience. And I'm really just excited to share this book with you and to share this book with Leah with you. Leah is really the one true godmother of this book. She has really, I'm gonna cry if I talk about it too much, but I'm just gonna say that she's changed my life in so many minuscule ways that I feel more aligned than I ever felt in my whole life. And despite the fact that the world is on fire, I am deeply grounded in my own joy, individual joy. And this book is here to prove that you can have it too, kind of. And so there was no person that could do this job today of celebrating the launch of it other than Leah. So I'm really grateful to you for being here.
Thank you. I'm already
Let's not
crying.
cry about
I'm already
it.
crying.
Okay.
Okay.
Ask your questions.
Okay. Well, did you want to start with reading an intro or no? Are we
Oh yeah,
doing that?
that's very sensible.
I would like you to read an excerpt so they can hear the juiciness of this work. And then I have a whole lot of questions. Is this too loud? Is this okay? Okay.
Can you hear me without this? Yes.
Just hold it close.
She's a rebel.
I just need two hands to hold the book, and both the hands have the shakes.
Do you want me
and
to
so,
hold
you know.
Do you want me to hold it or no?
No. We're good. Okay. So the introduction obviously lays out kind of the personal context of the book and why Alanis matters to me. It takes maybe 9 minutes to read it, and I'm just gonna do the whole do. All right? Okay.
It's good.
Oh, hello, Mr. Man. You didn't think I'd come back. You didn't think I'd show up with my army and this ammunition on my back. Alanis Morissette, right through you. These 4 lines have been on the top of my epigraph list since I was in high school. I just didn't know they would appear at the front of a book that is actually about Alanis Morissette herself. For many of us who slouched against the chain link fence with the class of '99 banner drooping from it, hovering like ornery ghosts within the thin zone between Gen X and millennialism, Alanis is the conduit through which we still cry out loud. On the weekend of my 14th birthday, Jagged Little Pill reached the top spot on the Billboard 200. It stayed in the top 10 for an unprecedented 72 weeks, and thanks to the constant scream of it on the radio and on MTV, it started to seem to me that my coven was powerful enough to survive high school. I listened to JLP on loop on my yellow Sony Sport Walkman on a cassette that I begged someone to make for me. Despite being a queer with young, deadbeat parents and suffering heavily from that chronic condition known the world over as generalized teenage femaleness, whatever kind of hooligan I wasn't snatching albums off the racks at the Tower Records at the mall. Right Through You spoke to me, as a fledgling writer, the most because it presented information about what to expect when attempting to deploy creativity in a marketplace. There would be assholes. I was already cynical about most adults, especially business-minded ones with any real money, so Alanis provided confirmation for my intuition about the situation. It felt really nice to know somebody could see me. Alanis prepared me, though she was barely 21 when JLP came out and probably felt very ill-prepared herself. She gave me the power to stand in my rage and to use my anger as an energy to do good in the world. I say Alanis, not because we're friends, although parasocially speaking, I am certainly her friend, but because no academic treatment of Madonna ever refers to her as Chacon. It's a useless form of rigor, and it verges on insolence when the one-named celebrity is female. Let Alanis be a queen. Her epic war against Mr. Man, begun when both of us were teenagers, still appeals. She is our raging sage. She is our punk monk. As a result of this aggressively female noise, I did make it out of high school alive, and then realized I was tough enough to return to the scene of the crime as a 10th grade English teacher at a public high school in the north burbs of a major metro area not unlike the one that I grew up in. People ask me how I do it, how I relate to the secret hearts of those on this planet who are simply reaching for a 15th year that doesn't suck so hard. My army is over 3,000 strong now, full of legendary children. When they have shown me Lana Del Rey or Billie Eilish or Olivia Rodrigo, I have shown them Alanis. Something inside of me is frozen there at 14, going on 40. And whatever that thing is, it's got Alanis on repeat because there is the laugh of Medusa in it. There are qualities in the lyrics and vocals, in the videos and her subsequent work in other genres of page and stage that capture the ineffable psychology of a specifically female existential awareness. JLP is a manual and a manifesto. Alanis is not on the model of a radical feminist assassin or separatist. Instead, she offers the sound of Antigone knocking at Creon's gate. Her ongoing body of work, with JLP at its center, is a prime example of what French feminists in the 70s called écriture féminine, women's writing. Women writing their way out of oppression by using words and forms that escape classic, patriarchal approaches to writing. Of course, in not bowing down to conventionalist rock expectations, Alanis paradoxically made oh so much money, while simultaneously receiving at best mixed reviews and definitely not enough awards. JLP is one of only 3 albums to sell above 15 million copies in the US since Nielsen SoundScan began tracking such stats in '91. Alanis is nipping at the heels of fellow Canadian Shania Twain, and then she only needs to sell 1 million further copies to overtake Metallica. Yet, she's been denied Rock and Roll Hall of Fame induction since 2016. Hell, Carole King didn't get in as a performer until I was 39, even though she'd been eligible since I was 14, and even though my mom probably feels about Tapestry just as I do about JLP. On the Rolling Stone revised 2020 list of the top 500 albums of all time, JLP was slotted, isn't it ironic, at 69. They gave her 3 sentences. Any substantive discussion of her legacy has been so far barred by the keepers of the canonical gates. Admittedly, my own fandom of Alanis has not gone the distance in banging on those gates. My senior year of high school, I dismissed most of supposed former infatuation junkie because my own angst was still growing, and I did not care to hear any of hers receding. The Alanis Unplugged album pushed me further away because my juvenile Alanis mania couldn't cope with all the vocal variations she layered onto her classic lyrics. I was pissed off that she prevented me from credibly singing along, which I now see clearly as one of the superior powers of her poetry, the way it's able to be sung through the lens of so many genre twists and communicate effectively, yet slightly differently in each of them. Her feminist strategies were more advanced than mine, a ghost of future revolution. By 2002, Under Rug Swept felt like a joke about her being relegated to the dustbin. So I went to college and forgot about my love of Alanis. We went our separate ways, both seeming happier or at least very much wiser now in middle age. During my period of inattentiveness, her world, of course, did not stop turning. Like many people, I checked back in, thanks to the nudge from the announcement that JLP was being turned into a Broadway show. To my delight, but not my surprise, I feel much more able now to appreciate the full spectrum of her work, rather than just hearkening back to JLP for a few weeks and then forgetting about it again. This time, I dove right for the rabbit hole, digging deeper into all the albums I'd missed during my 20s and 30s, and moreover, into the fascinating array of other projects through which Alanis continues to communicate, with unrivaled clarity, wit, and urgency. Neither of us has mellowed with age. As it turns out, all these little green shoots that for 20 years I'd brushed off as nothing like the sturdy 6-foot sunflower of JLP are rhizomatic, full of ideas and missions just below the surface that are solidly linked to all the things that I loved about JLP. The seedling of that album has grown into an undeniably lush garden. This book is meant to convince you to take a look at what Alanis has accomplished since her debut album, to appreciate both how her work has evolved and how facets of her subsequent projects are coated in a thin layer of 1995. She never dropped the banner we carried along with her during that time. She stitched more pieces onto it, patched it up as needed, got older and wiser about how to wave it. Alanis is still at work, still doesn't oblige any wine and dine. She continues to see, feel, know, walk right through that bullshit. If we are not overly careful, women-identified people face a lifetime of erasures, perpetually viewed as nothing more than meal tickets or sweet backloaded puppets. And yet, Alanis compels us to have faith that if we have the courage to give voice to whatever is the feminist equivalent of Whitman's barbaric yawp, Mr. Man will inevitably be forced to wonder why his name doesn't appear in our credits. It's a way of speaking truth to power, to parents, priests, and pricks. And it does take an army, in which I am proudly one member. May this little book serve as part of our ammunition.
Pretty awesome. I've read the whole book already. I don't know who in here got an early copy, but it's amazing. And it's evident that Alanis has made a big impact on you. I'm a lifelong Alanis fan myself, well, since the age of 14. And that awareness you have of the breadth of her work going so far beyond just this one impactful album. I too have experienced that. I'm curious, who or where might you have been without Alanis's influence?
Oh man, I fell into a super deep depression after the suicide of Kurt Cobain. And so I guess eventually I would have turned to Pearl Jam for solace. You know, like when you think back to like who were the bands to connect with, I wasn't totally on board the garbage train at that point. Like I thought Shirley Manson was so cool, but like her music was not exactly for me. And so, I mean, I was coming for music and music was coming for me. That was always going to be the case. And so like I guess I just would have had to find some other artist to like make it through high school, and probably it would have been Pearl Jam, I think. But like the minute I got to college, somebody handed me an Ani DeFranco album, and so like even if high school had not really worked out in a grunge capacity, then I think I would have made it to the land of the lesbians anyway. You know, like I would have got there on the back of Ani DeFranco, most likely.
Where are you in the Indigo Girls?
It took me a long time to get what they were about because I am not from the country of Atlanta. I am from the country of Chicago. And it's different. Yeah. I just didn't know about them for like a very long time.
Yeah.
The first Georgia band that I ever like really got into was REM. Again, because they were just losing my religion. That was like very much the jam my senior year of high school. I loved that video. Because when MTV still played videos, you know. So somewhere in there, yeah.
Cool. Pearl Jam. Alrighty. I was going towards Sarah McLachlan personally.
That was the first concert I went to without my parents.
Really?
Lisa Loeb and Sarah McLachlan the summer before she started the Lilith tour. They would not let me go to the Lilith tour unaccompanied, and I was certainly not going to allow them to accompany me, so we compromised on no one is doing that.
That works. Thank you, Alanis. Thank you, Alanis, for entering our lives. What was your process in birthing this book? Because this is so, it's different than your other books, and there's your voice throughout it, but there's it's got a different flavor, for sure.
This book was a healing process for me. I say it campily and sarcastically, but it's also so very the truth of the matter. I like writing books that are sort of psychological profiles of the work of a musician. I've done 2 different books on Tom Petty, 1 book on Springsteen that won Georgia Author of the Year. I did a book on Andy Warhol that had a long Velvet Underground aside. And so I've been doing like chapters like this or books like this for a while. And then one day I just looked up and was like, everything I'm writing is about dudes. And I'm not a dude. And, you know, there's just a real shortage of women in every element of the music industry. Like a lot of industries, but, you know, music in particular, I think, has suffered from that. But growing up in the 90s, there were so many women musicians around, and it was like sort of a, like, I don't know, the magazines wanted you to pick only one. You know, the radio stations wanted you to pick only one. And so I think, like, all these books about dudes that I had written sort of stacked up, and I thought, I can't do this anymore. I can't just keep knocking these dudes in the shins because they don't even see me. I've written thousands of pages about musicians who will never care to read those books. And so I wanted to do something that was a positive work, not something that kicks a famous person in the shins, but actually like lifts up someone who I feel deserves to be lifted up, who hasn't got the recognition she deserves. As so many women, female journalists, female music producers, female stagehands, female artists of all shapes, sizes, colors that make the covers of these albums, that mix them and distribute them and write about them and publicize them. And I wanted to do something that supported that was like affirmative in the world, rather than just trying to like make my small negative dent in the world of bros. So I was searching for a target, and then along comes University of Texas Press, and my dear friend Tanya Pearson, who is the director of the Women in Rock Oral History Project, had done a book for them on Marianne Faithfull. And I read that book and I thought, oh my God, Tanya, this is the most beautiful book. And so I thought, you know, this whole series is pretty good and filled with fierce ladies. I feel like there's a definite feminist project going on at the University of Texas Press. And so I messaged them and I said, here's like 10 people that I'd be willing to write a book about. Do any of those appeal? And then we got it narrowed down a little bit, and Ani DeFranco was on that short list too. So was Queen Latifah, but I thought surely there is a black female musician out there who could do a better job of writing this book than me. So I put that one down, even though I'm a Latifah stan for sure. Yeah. And so we eventually landed on Alanis, and I sent them 2 sample chapters, and that's how it got kicked off.
Awesome. You mentioned that when supposed former infatuation junkie came out, you weren't ready to let go of the anger. I liked your term juvenile Alanis mania, and you were still craving that angst. How has Alanis's evolving spirituality and her emotional growth influenced yours? Or did you just notice that in like later in life as you looked back at the parallels and the divergences?
So much later in life. Oh, I'm going to turn 44 this year. I've spent so much of my life picking at the scabs of how I grew up, and like big hurts and little hurts that were done to me that I still remember, and the big hurts and little hurts that I did unto others in order to try to fix those. It never fixed a thing, you know. I spent a long time like listening to her music, but not getting it, you know? Like, I enjoyed the sound of it. I thought a lot of it was good poetry, but it didn't cut me to the core. The way the initial work spoke to me because my anger was right there, desperate, hungry for words to describe and explain. So it was easy to latch on to that part. But as she grew, I began to feel less like I was riding in the VIP section with her and more like I was the caboose and she was like pretty far ahead of me and I couldn't really figure out how to get through all the cars to make it back to ground zero there. But eventually I did, and a lot of that is thanks to just overwhelming growth in my spiritual practices over the last few years. That's thanks to you, thanks to my acupuncturist, thanks to Seed to Star, thanks to Stillwell's, working with stone medicine, becoming a Reiki master, doing all that work. You know, the woo-woo-ness that I sort of got blocked from by my parents when I was younger, you know. I had a lot of healing of my witch wound, so to speak, that needed to be done. And so now that that's taken place, I feel like, you know, my chains are broken and I'm like really here for the first time. And so now I get it. And now when I listen to her work, it's like, oh, of course.
Yeah.
So obvious. And this fits in all along. And like, oh, I wish I had heard this song that way when I was 23, or I wish I had heard this song that way when I was 40. And now I'm with it. Yeah. Now I'm riding in the front again.
Yeah. Awesome. And you've gone way beyond the music in this book, because much of why Alanis matters is in those varied interests and passions and the authenticity with which she moves through life. And you talk in the book about her work bringing awareness of highly sensitive persons and how you yourself identify or are a highly sensitive person, right? And I love how you tie that into that branding of the angry white female and sort of elucidate how the sensitivity. And show of hands, how many people in here are an HSP, highly sensitive person? Awesome, yeah. And how, like, for Alanis, and perhaps, I don't know if this is true for you too, it's shifted that understanding of yourself and your audience. That sensitivity comes with this intensity. And I love this quote from your book. You say, in reframing Alanis's work within the context of her temperament as a highly sensitive person, and grasping how this is frequently at odds with prevailing patriarchal systems of value that are the corrupted ways of this land, we can begin to understand that she is not angry. She's biologically wired to be intense, and she's frustrated by your apathy. I love that. I love how you weave bits of her lyrics in, and maybe like only hardcore Alanis fans get it, but I feel like JLP, at least JLP, is so much a part of our collective awareness that people are gonna read that and it's gonna, like, you're gonna start singing the songs, but you're also opening the dialogue around like the self-reflection of like, oh, am I a bitch or am I just like really intense? So as an HSP yourself, how did this awareness or this relationship to that sensitivity shift your sense of who you are and the voice you bring into your work?
It changed everything. You know, like, you wonder your whole life what's wrong with you, and then you suddenly learn that there's like an actual medical label that is a relevant one, not like a biased, bigoted, horrifying one, but like one that actually genuinely characterizes the parts of you that have been unexplainable for so long, you know? And it's like, to be a highly sensitive person, for those that you don't know, it's just, it's not sensitivity like emotional sensitivity, it's physically being able to have a heightened awareness of sometimes all the senses, but usually like a particular one. Like for me, it's nose and a little bit in my ear. And so a lot of witchy white ladies who consider themselves to be clairvoyant in some fashion. Actually, the clair has to do with our ability to like perceive sounds or smells or sights or voices or faces in a different way than most people can, like in a more minute micro expression type of way than most people can access. It's sort of like the opposite of face blindness, you know, where you have really intense, quick gut feelings about people, and so you're the canary in the coal mine, you know. You're in animal species other than humans, like in the wild. The highly sensitive creatures are the ones that warn the rest of the herd or the team or the group or the family or whatever words you want to use there. They warn them because they are the most able to sense when danger is coming. And so realizing that must somehow be a part of my purpose, like it led me directly to the idea that I have to give good guidance because I'm capable of it. And realizing that was not something that was wrong with me, but actually like a gift that somewhere around like 20% of the population possesses, if only they were aware that it was a gift and not, you know, something that makes them creepy or different, would be good. It changed everything for me to think about it in those terms.
Awesome. How are y'all out there, the sensitive ones? You're good? Good.
I was thinking earlier, this is probably the most chronically ill audience I've ever spoken to. Like, no, seriously, looking around the room, you know, I know so many of you on a deep personal level, and it's just like the amount of the beautiful range of disability that we have here with us today is so cool. And yeah, I know a lot of us are sick all of the time with a lot of different things. But then we also know that there are superpowers that are associated with those sicknesses. And I'm learning to make the most of them, I guess is what I'm saying.
Yeah. And I feel like Alanis has done a beautiful job modeling that as well. Like, she did not pursue fame and success in the same ways and in the ways I'm sure her record company wanted her to. She really like pushed back and was like, no, I want to stay at home and have some kids, and I'm going to bring them on tour with me. And
she wore pants on stage.
Pants. And that authenticity and that awareness of that sensitivity and how it should be cared for and tended to, I think, is something that we're all learning, and the world is changing because we're learning that. Yeah. Okay, so we've got to talk about ironic and the ironic debate, which is thoroughly addressed in the book. I really appreciated that. I really love how you address it because you blend in your own background as an academic as well as bringing up how this ongoing issue was addressed in JLP the musical, where they chose to set that song in an English classroom. And you actually write in the book that this was an epic chance to reject, remedy, or advance criticisms of the original album. Older and wiser Alanis did not throw the moment away, but instead positioned the critique itself within the musical to add further layers of irony. And sidebar, your book is actually the only scholarly discussion I've seen of her musical. Yes. I still haven't seen the musical.
Thanks, COVID.
Ugh. Anyways, you go on to share how the playwright, Diablo Cody, wanted to make fun of the song's critics rather than the song itself, like so many people have. Do you mind putting on your English teacher hat for us once more and giving us some added insight into how the musical and how Alanis's ability to poke fun at herself adds nuance and arguably sophistication to her own brand of irony?
Yeah. Okay. So we know what this debate is about, right? A lot of people think ironic means that Alanis is dumb because she wrote a song that is supposed to be full of ironies, but it's mostly just bummers and not, strictly speaking, ironies. There's a long chapter in the book that actually, I hope that after I'm long dead and gone, that people point to that particular chapter and are like, oh, this really settled that. You know?
Yes.
Like,
I think
of all
you
the
did.
things I've written, I hope that one is like the nail in the coffin of a literary debate that has been carried on for far too long. I hope that I adjudicated it really successfully. But basically the idea is that people who criticize this song are using the Greeks' notion of irony, which is that you have to have what you have literally said is opposite of what you have meant. But there is a whole other school of thought on irony, kind of pioneered by Roland Barthes, who said that that semiotics, the study of words, the meanings of words, the multiplicity of meanings of words, is like a sliding spectrum with a lot of gray areas. And so that irony is a form of linguistic play and not a matter of dualism or opposites. And so the Greeks' notion of irony is like not very well advanced and is only useful for people who see things in black and white, whereas the Barthesian notion of irony is much more like kids get Barthesian irony without any trouble whatsoever. The sliding scale of memery on the internet, you know, like really makes clear all the different ways that we have to approach sarcasm now, you know. And so Alanis, okay, maybe at the time that she wrote Ironic when she was 19, maybe she thought those things were ironic and they weren't. She admits that. It's not about like the fact that she originally fucked up. It's the fact that when she had an opportunity to revamp, because this song was definitely going into the musical, she placed it really carefully in the context of an English class where there's a writing workshop going on and the students are criticizing the writer of the poem, of the song lyrics, and basically arguing for the Greeks. And so then the musical itself argues for this more Barthesian notion of play, and that kind of wins the day and saves the writing and makes the writer feel able to say what they need to say in the way that they wanted to say it in the first place. So she does a good job both of making fun of the original debate, kind of admitting culpability in the original part of the debate, but then also like rectifying that, and it's an awesome redemption song.
It is. And I think your chapter really does adjudicate the debate. Like, I was like, yes, I want everyone that my dad still makes fun of Alanis for that song. I'm like, shut up. Yeah, awesome. Whale. Okay, you also mentioned that Alanis was a harbinger of a post-ironic future with her sincerity and authenticity. And I think as someone who works with young people, you see that in them. And we taught this awesome Tarot for Teens class where the teens were like looking at every king in the deck and was like, patriarchy. And I loved it, and the nuance with which they're reading these cards and the humor they bring in and these like layers of like, once we get more authentic and real, we're getting beyond that irony that the song is about in the first place. But I appreciated that. Now the musical, because we're talking about the musical too, it ends with You Learn, and in that song, it contains the phrase that became the album's title track. Can we talk about the symbolism of the jagged little pill?
Yes.
Well, can I quote you one more time because I want everyone to hear your book?
Yeah.
Or do you just want to
go ahead.
Are you getting embarrassed? Am I embarrassing you? Do y'all want to hear a little
what
bit
is
more?
Embarrassed?
What
Go
is
ahead.
embarrassed?
Go ahead.
Good answer. So you say, for me, the jagged little pill has always been a supreme symbol of hauntology. A sigil is a type of symbol that is used in magic. It's a pictorial signature of a spirit, sort of a ghost coat of arms. And you speak of being haunted by Alanis and her works. And if this book is a result of that, I'm glad. I'm glad she has haunted you. How does the jagged little pill show up as a sigil in your own alchemy?
I don't have this tattoo, but I have met so many ladies. It's only ever the ladies, that have a Jagged Little Pill tattoo. You know, just like a little oval, and it's just JLP in that typewriter font right up in there, and you just know, like, sister, what has happened to you? Tell me, let us have a beer, tell me your story, you know? And so, I mean, that's what it is. It's just like each of us swallows our emotional baggage down, and it is jagged. You know, all of us have different hurts, big and small, traumas, big and small. And they just swim around in our stomach. And the swallowing part, that is jagged, that hurts. But the stomach does not feel the jaggedness. You know, she sings that it feels so good swimming in your stomach. And it's like, how can that be? Well, the idea, to me at least, is like, yes, I am carrying around this baggage, this emotional baggage. And it does feel good because, like, even though it sometimes feels like it's a drag, it weighs me down, it also... you got to have a place to put your stuff for reflection, for processing, and it can't all be done in the instant of the hurts that are happening to you, right? And so you carry it around for a while. It has to dissolve in there. It becomes a part of who you are, you know? I'm sure every one of us takes at least a multivitamin. Tell me you take your multivitamins. If not, you know, like much more serious prescription pharmaceuticals, maybe some of those are even ones that keep you alive or that make you feel like possible to get up and put your pants on and go out in the world and have a job and pay your bills and so on, right? We all have jagged little pills to swallow, and we do that because we do know the benefit of carrying that around, of assimilating that into ourselves. If we didn't have the low points, it would be difficult to define the high points in some sense, but that's like only if you're bought into dualism over the idea that all things are one thing anyway, but that's a whole separate chapter of the book.
There's a chapter on that. There is. I also love how you talk about Alanis as a queer ally and how she's shown over and over again over the years that allyship, just in changing lyrics of the songs or just making it very evident that she is queer in her approach to love, in the bigness with which she loves, the fluidity, the liberatory nature of love that she embodies and that she constantly advocates for. And have you had any reflections or any awarenesses of your own relationship to being queer that are connected to Alanis and the way she embodies that or is an ally in that way?
Yeah, for sure. So I think one of the most important examples, and this is a comparison that's not made in the book, but it's one I thought about a lot as I was working on the chapter that's about all the very many ways that she serves as a queer ally. Nearly all her work, if she is speaking to a love interest, it's you. It's not like, she doesn't use words like baby, sweetie. There's no like infantilizing of romantic relationships ever. And there's also no masculine pronouns really anywhere. Even as you know, she's going through like a horrible dissolution of her engagement to Ryan Reynolds or breaking up with Dave Coulier or like whatever like nonsense Canadian Starship Enterprise thing is going on, you know what her love life entails because that's in the tabloids, but in the songs, it's just you. You know, just you. The generic figure of Mr. Man, Mr. Duplicity, but when it's love songs, when she's talking about navigating relationships, when she's talking about caregiving and choosing family for herself, it's always you. It's never some dude or some word that idly refers to some dude. And so that really speaks to me because I think it holds open space for all kinds of people invested in all kinds of relationships to see themselves in the song without having to contort to fit their relationship into a box of some more limiting language. And so that's very important to me. But the comparison point that I was thinking about, which is not in the book, is like Melissa Etheridge. Melissa Etheridge was the only even semi-out lesbian musician at the same time that Alanis is in the water, you know? And Melissa Etheridge, too, is doing you instead of she. But Melissa is doing it self-preservatively because you can't get on the radio with a woman singing to another woman a love song. You can't get on the radio, and you know, if she doesn't get on the radio, then forget about another album deal. And so thinking about how Melissa Etheridge had to do it in a self-preserving way versus thinking about how Alanis kind of like just elbowed her way on in there, like did the same rhetorical move, but it was interpreted so differently and accepted so much more widely, you know, that she's holding space for us with the way that she chooses to construct the person that she's talking to in her songs.
That's beautiful. I'm tearing up over here. I love it. Well, Alanis has always been a bit of a trailblazer, and she keeps creating on her own terms. And you have this awesome, it's my last quote, I promise. Okay, it's this awesome passage, and you say this is in relation to that having to embrace our monstrosity as women. And you say this is especially true for creatives, those of us with generative instincts to build a manifesto out of the facets of our lives that sadden and terrify men who don't know how to witness us, don't know how to read us or love us or employ us. They can't handle all the information before they turn us away. Let those men keep fearing when women like Alanis put their shoulder to the wheel. In your own creative trailblazing, Megan, what were the ways in which you had to choose yourself over the approval or egos of men?
Oh my God. I don't even, There's too many names to name. You know what I mean? Honestly, there's too many names to name. I think of every professor I worked with. I think of every department chair I worked for. I think of everything I ever applied for in my life, starting around age 16. And just all I think of being kicked out of a creative writing class when I was 14 years old, honest to God, by a male teacher who like just didn't get what I was up to. I think about the anonymous peer reviewer for this book who said he just didn't get it. And he said it in a way that, look, he was anonymous, but I knew it was a man, you know? And so just, man, I mean, I know some good ones. That's a short list. That's a short list that I could give you probably pretty easily. But at the same time, just so many times, you know? And I guess that was my impulse to kick as many of them in the shins as I could in the earlier books that I had written. You know, most of my publishers have been men. Most of my editors have been men. And really, in order to avoid this situation, to work with other women and yet not be relegated to the so-called ghetto of chicklet, which I certainly am not, you know, I spent a long time cultivating a voice that I thought men would understand. And I felt like an asshole. I did. But I did it for a long time, like just my best impersonation of Hunter S. Thompson is what I was doing for a long time. And there were a lot of people that were like, that's so cool. Yeah, get 'em. And I just was like, but this is a show. Are you not entertained? You know? And it was like, maybe 40% me, but 60% of it was just like carefully picking adjectives that an alcoholic dickhead would choose, you know? And one of the things I let go of to make it possible to write in my own voice was the idea of money. So isn't that messed up? That I had to decide, like, let me abandon the idea of fame and fortune so that I can write in my own voice. But that is what I feel like I had to do. Yeah. And yeah, so now I guess I'm like a cult anti-hero or something. That's cool. That seems pretty rock and roll, and I guess I will take that instead. But like, I see the hoops now, and I just refuse to go through. And it's cost me a lot of opportunities, no lie. But I don't work with anybody that I don't want to work with. How's that? I am largely my own boss now. I teach part-time at 2 universities. One of my bosses is a very nice man. One of my bosses is a very nice lady. And because we get along, or until we don't get along, that's what I'm doing, you know? But it feels good to have just said, nah. But I hit my head against the wall a lot of times before I realized that I could say no. The power of that. Right?
Yes.
It's the thing we tell the children. It's like, set your boundaries, be firm, say no if you feel uncomfortable. Do you know how hard it is to say no do you know how hard it is to recognize when you feel uncomfortable? That you're not just being weird, you know? Like, oh, it's just your thing, you're so sensitive, right? To first recognize that you've been made uncomfortable and then to say no in a way that is heard, that's hard to do. That's grown-up stuff.
Very grown up.
Yeah.
It takes practice.
Yeah. The kids seem pretty good at it, though.
Yeah.
I admire them. I admire them and their ability to draw firm boundaries. We didn't have the ability to draw firm boundaries when I was 15. And that cost me a lot.
Yeah.
It cost, I think, most of us here quite a lot. Yeah. And, you know, I think of my grandmother or even my mother, that's just not how we did it back then. It was a different time. You know? Like, yeah, but the feelings are the same.
They are. Well, sounds like we might have some trauma to process. And you have a chapter on that too, where you talk about how the tribute bands, the Alanis tribute bands, y'all, it's a way of processing our 90s traumas. And so I thought it would be fun if we access some cathartic joy.
Yes.
And have a sing-along.
Yes.
And Alanis sing-along on International Women's Day.
Yes.
At the Decatur Public Library.
Yes.
We love libraries. Yes.
Yes.
Okay, y'all know You Learn.
You're going to learn, you learn right now.
You're going to learn, you learn.
That felt fucking good, didn't it? Yeah. That's magic we made with you that can't be undone.
I think it was cutting out to hear the high note, just to make sure you were hitting it was like a Cynthia Erivo.
I had it, Joe. I had it.
I feel it. Yeah.
I have one final question before we turn it over to these lovely people.
Cool.
You work with teens. You read tarot for all ages. You lead olfactory adventures, and you continue to teach and write. Will you let us know some of the other things you're working on these days?
Yes. Yes, I am always working on other things. It's one of the characteristics people like least about me. As Joe mentioned, I am co-editing an anthology with my dear friend, Mr. Colin Kelly, who you know as the new editor of the Georgia Voice and the continuing editor of Rough Draft Atlanta. It's an anthology of poems written by superfans of Stevie Nicks. There's a lot of Moon stuff, and it's going to be good. That's going to come out in the springtime of 2026. I thought that I was working on a novel, but it turns out I'm not a novelist, and I'm not going to do that. I'm an argumentative person, and I'm not going to dress it up in metaphor, and so I quit working on my novel, and I'm just going to tell it. I'm working on a collection of essays, And that's all the word there is about that at this moment. I'm working on a collection of essays. And then the last thing that I am working on is an oracle deck on the basis of my incense expertise. Yeah. So pretty soon you can have your fortune read. Yeah, there's like 3 or 4 fortune tellers in the audience who are like, when is that coming? Tell us about the incense oracle. Yeah, that's coming too. And the last thing I'm making is not literary. It's just incendiary. I'm making incense.
It's so good. I got it. Like
Thank you. Yeah, there's about 6 people in this room that have sniffed it already, and it's real good shit. And so you will be able to purchase incense, serious ritual grade ceremonial incense, made with my own love and affection by hand in my kitchen. Pretty soon at the rock shops where I practice, where you can find me, where you can find your own practice and find yourself, to be honest. That's at Stillwell's in Stone Mountain and Seed to Star right here in Decatur. Pretty soon.
Thank you, Megan. I had fun. Any questions from the audience? Oh, right you're right there.
You made me realize something. First of all, I am going to be 85 years old. I started in 1962 in a Madison Avenue ad agency. When I applied for a job, the woman said to me at the employment agency, "Can you type?" And I said, "Yes, but I have a college degree." "Oh, good for you. You sure you can type?" I made $75 a week. The thing is, my second job was in an international airline. At one point, I had to take a telephone company man into the machine room to show him what to fix. And he stood in front of the door and said, "You're not getting out of here unless you kiss me."
Oh, Jesus.
And I looked around, and I looked on the floor, and I saw a crowbar. And I picked up the crowbar, and I advanced on him, and I said, "You're letting me out." I never told my boss. It never occurred to me to tell my boss. When you said your grandmother said we didn't do things that way, we had no way to do it. We had no backup. You made me realize there was no music we could listen to bring us up and show us we had any power. We had to figure it out by ourselves. And that is why the women of my generation, and when you talk to your mothers and your grandmothers, we were alone. There was nobody to help us to figure anything out. And no woman today realizes that. And you wonder why we look at you and say, "Be strong," because we had to be, we had nothing else. And you made me realize that we had nothing else, and I hope I make some of you realize we had nothing else.
Thank you for your story. Yeah, the Ronettes were not doing it for you. The Ronettes were not doing it for you. They were not telling you what you needed to know.
So let's go back to Hunter S. Thompson and how that was, I guess, one of your models. Did you not know of, or was it years later that you maybe learned about Dorothy Parker or Virginia Woolf or anybody like that? That was a very strong woman, strong voice. I like to think no nonsense.
Yeah, my education was shockingly devoid of female role models. I mean, I read A Little Wolf. Dorothy Parker would not have been taught in any of the programs where I participated. Plus, I mean, she was a hard character, to be sure, but like ultimately doomed herself to alcoholism. So I don't know that that's a role model I'd really want to emulate either. The first female writer that really hit home for me was Fran Lebowitz, who, you know, she's just a dirty smoker, but, you know, fortunately still with us, at least. That was, I mean, in a Dorothy Parker area, I guess I would say. But it never occurred to me to try to be her, but just the fact that she was possible. But even she, I mean, she wrote one book, and then she started editing for magazines and never went back to it. And you're sort of like, how come this great lady only wrote one book? You know? And yeah, there were not women around who had voices that seemed, I have met a lot of writers who had interesting voices, but none of them were successful in the way that I was told a writer could be successful. You know, like half of the most famous female poets, they put their heads in the oven. And so I don't want that for a role model. Spare me your Sylvia Plath, honestly, you know? So, yeah, I guess I was in some way like starved for influences a little bit. And I think that's the reason I turned to music, because the power of those women seemed much more, you know, just three chords, that's all I needed. It seemed I was like able to reach for it in a way that I couldn't reach for Virginia Woolf or Dorothy Parker. Yeah.
Are you aware of a show called The Great North?
No.
They actually have Alanis Morissette on there. She is basically an aura, and there's a girl in there who has no mother, and she goes to Alanis Morissette outside her window as a mentor, and Alanis Morissette will actually give her like information. She is built on this.
Oh, that's awesome. No, I'm gonna go home and look it up right away. Yeah. Look, the amount of things that she does is sort of like, it's insane. You know, she has this podcast that's like hours and out, like endless, over 100 hours of talk with psychologists that she's done. She did an advice column for The Guardian for a year and a half. I mean, it took a minute to go through her catalog of all the things, and I'm sure I missed some TV and film stuff. There is a big chunk in a chapter about dogma, which I think is like on a related theme probably to what you're talking about, but that specific example escaped me. Thank you. I will definitely homework.
But in the beginning, when they're doing the credits, she's in the credits.
Yeah, I'm going to scope it out. Thank you.
So I'm thinking, just to kind of piggyback on the previous question. So like you talked about Fran Lebowitz and like that voice there, and I when I think of Alanis, like she hit me in a time of like a breakup, like and like that Jagged Little Pill was like, it got me through it, and it's there's like the barbaric yaw, you know, like the thing that I would never do at karaoke unless I was that drunk. and I listen to like the more modern genre of like angry women, like in the like Chapel Road space, and I don't hear that kind of like barbaric yawiness. Like, who are some women performers that are in like that are more current than Alanis, that you feel embody that barbaric yaw, that like that gender
rawness.
It's a rawness that is not it's not based out of like out of desperation, but it's like purely. I don't know. Yeah.
You know, when you started talking about the yop, I went immediately to Jewel and the fact that she's like a champion yodeler. But that's not, that to me is a definite like feminine barbaric yop, totally. But that's not the like modern answer that you're looking for, because I think even less people remember Jewel than remember Alanis, so that's a thing. But I guess, I mean, I feel like Lady Gaga is pretty effectively continuing to, people think of her as old now, but that's absurd to me. I mean, I think she very effectively capitalized on some of these ideas. The construction of her audience as like My Little Monsters and the way that she refers to them, I think, is very empowering to people who are different. I don't know, to be honest, at 44, I'm right at that age where I've like stopped listening to new top 40. And now, because I have quit being a high school English teacher, I have unplugged from my hamster wheel, and now I'm just like part-time at 2 universities where the majority of my students are also like fully functioning adults or partially functioning adults, you know, but like they're also not really listening to top 40 radio. And so, you know, since I'm not having a steady influx of 14-year-old vibes around me constantly, I no longer really know who's cool until they show up on like the Grammy Awards or something, or on the last segment in Stephen Colbert at Night or something like that. That's how I get my new bands now, which is like the funnel to the olds, and I'm comfortable with that, I guess. Like, if you want a more modern example, ask a more modern girl, is what I'm saying.
You know, I think everyone's bringing up good points, but maybe I'm a jaded Gen Xer, but in high school, what was cool was not top 40. If it was top 40, it was instantly the opposite. Mm-hmm. So, I mean, you know, I happened to have been in Dallas, Texas when Black Flag burned the flag. And when that happened, we were there as high schoolers, not in our uniforms and our other attire. But, you know, so maybe that punkness, you know, or having that now, when you talk about female influence, I guess Blondie, you know what I mean? They're, you know, I have to go back and think, but we didn't really think in terms of isms. You know what I mean? It was more message, perhaps.
Yeah.
But then you brought up something that I'm, again, being very grateful and fortunate that I went to Emory as an undergraduate. And my first week of school, freshman year, the Indigo Girls were graduate students when I was undergraduate. So I came up through college with them on campus and playing. That, you know, that is part of when you're developing how you're thinking, right?
Yeah.
Critical thinking things. So, it just made me feel very fortunate. So thank you for making me realize how fortunate I am.
Yeah, I mean, there are several chapters in the book where this idea is laced in. Like, I grew up in John Hughes territory in the north suburbs of Chicago. All those movies were filmed like in the neighborhoods that I grew up in, and as top 40 radio was all I had. There was no like punk station to be had, and like, God forbid my dad should ever hear rap music coming out of my radio. I would be so in trouble for that, you know. There was like no listening to B96 in our house, you know. And so top 40 was all I had, and so Alanis was the only one that was there. She was the only one that broke through. And then like later I came to Throwing Muses and L7 and the Indigo Girls and like all those bands that are terrific and still kicking it, by the way. But like, it was Alanis and then Garbage, and like that was all that I could get.
Yeah, you didn't have like a little 5 points that you could go.
No, definitely not.
That may or may not. I mean, you know, we had this Deep Ellum was until it became popular, but you know, this area that you go to or you snuck out to go to, you know, places and clubs. Mm-hmm. But if it was on the radio, that was definitely not where you were interested in. Yeah.
Yeah.
So it's just something interesting. But John Hughes, of course, we all love him.
Yeah.
Well, first, Jet and Priscilla can hook you up with the new stuff. Sounds weirdly like as I was thinking about it, I've been letting my kids pick the songs, so we plug into their Spotify list on the way to school in the morning, and it's all so much like the stuff that we were listening to when we were 14.
Good.
Which is wild. But what does success, like you've touched a couple times on like sort of an evolution of like who you want to be as an artist and the paths that are available to women and like what we choose to take with us on whichever path we choose. And so I would love to hear more about success and like what does that mean to you now?
Oh yeah. Thanks for the setup, Abby.
You're welcome.
It means mutual aid and community. It means if I build it, you all will come. I mean, I can count on one hand the faces in this audience that I have not seen before in a different context. Some of you are my clients, some of you are my students, some of you I have worked alongside of for 20 some years, some of you are my very best friends in this life. For some, I am the client of you, and for some, it's like several of those relationships kind of all at one time. And so, man, I look at each of these faces, each and every one of you, I know how I love you and why. Each and every one of you, you know? And so I wrote this thing so we could come and sit here and be in community for an hour or two, and that could sustain us for a few more weeks until we get our shit together on something else, you know? And then we'll do it again, and we'll meet in a room and say our says and have our thoughts and feel seen for each other, with each other. And more, all the seats will be filled, because more and more people are getting hip to the things that we're starting to get hip to. And so I'm just feeling like if I build it, y'all will come. And thank you so much for coming, because that's what matters. I want this book to be seen, because that helps me to feel that I am seen. And that's what success means to me. Feeling like whatever it is that I need to put out there has been heard by someone who values it as much as I do. And I don't think being #1 on the New York Times bestseller list means you've been heard or seen. It means you have a banging publicist, and you probably got a pretty good advance that you will never be able to make back. You know what I mean? It's like, that's it. Enjoy your $5,000. That's all the money you're going to see for this book in your whole life. You know? Truly.
Well, I want to say that I feel like the luckiest person here, because right behind you, I'm in my 70s, so we had the best music ever. I mean, my first concert was Iron Butterfly, where Bird opened for him. But in the 60s, I mean, we had, you know, the people. I mean, Janice
Grace.
And, yes.
Yeah.
I mean, we had the Stones, and the Beatles came behind it with all that, but we had Jimi Hendrix.
Marianne Faithfull.
Yes, and we had Grace Slick and
Mavis Staples.
And Carole King, but
Yeah.
Crosby, Stills, and Nash. We had the best music ever, and it covered all the genres and all the words. And the thing was, we were the hippie generation that blew things out. Where you talked about beans. Yes, you were too early. And
She was scaring men with her crowbar.
Yeah, drug, sex, rock and roll. That was my life.
Yeah, that was
and
the
the
all
best
generations
music
music
ever. And yeah, and the thing about it is, what you're doing is so phenomenal, because the thing with us is the words of the music were so powerful that they really were starting to resonate around the world. I mean, people heard them. You know, people were hearing, and they were singing about things going on in the world. But anyhow, I love Alanis Morissette, and it's almost like, you know, in the later years, she got bypassed somehow, or that she didn't get noticed. And I love that you're doing Stevie Nicks. Oh my gosh. I mean, anyhow, I greatly appreciate this. And I got to be at your wedding #1 and your wedding #2. Well, no, I didn't get to, because Elvis, you know, was,
Elvis was in the
yes, but
Yeah.
anyhow, but the celebration. So I feel very fortunate, and I thoroughly enjoy your stuff. And just hearing it today, I had no idea what this was really going to be. Like, why Alanis Morissette? And I'm going to tell you that you delivered way more than I was expecting. I needed to get out and hear things. And you know, I was telling Mindy, you know, people ask, where am I going? I'm going to see friends of the kids, and they think I'm talking about kids, and our kids are 50s and 40s.
Thank you, Nancy.
I thoroughly enjoyed this. Oh my gosh, you are probably one of the best writers that I even know right now. Truly, you have a way to
Thank you.
really put out the relevant things, not just as a good writer, but to really touch this. Yeah, thank you. That's all I can say.
So
Thank
now
you.
I feel obligated. No, I'm here obviously by way of my daughters, who endlessly I heard all their music endlessly, and I've actually decided to go home and like interview them with some of the things you mentioned, so that it really. Oh, your generation opened up a lot of ways that we could learn how to treat the world a little better. Mm-hmm. And I think this generation, I have grandchildren, are phenomenal the way they care about other people. But I do want to thank you all for that, because we just were like, suck it up. That's sort of, and you guys show a gentler way to live. And I thank anybody for that who's part of that. So thank you.
My question was, you mentioned really going through like a period of depression, and I will say for me, Alanis has been pivotal with helping me get through some really dark times, both as far as religious trauma and childhood trauma, say Mary Jane and Forgiven from Jagged Little Pill. And I know you had talked about just how much Jagged Little Pill helped you kind of identify your own place and reacting and feeling how you felt about patriarchal oppression. But I was wondering if her songs helped you through your depressive times as well.
Yeah, it turns out that my sadness is predicated on disappointment with the state of the world. It's not depression in the sense of like my chemicals and their imbalances or anything like that, but it's just, I think, like as an energy worker, there are moments where the vibe just feels so thick and so unliftable, and you're like prying your way through it. Yes, and that there's just a certain mojo of Alanis. It's in the screech, it's in the sound of her voice, like those very high nasal notes that she does. The sound of it, I feel, pierces through the fog, in a very literal, like visceral, almost visual way for me. And then the way that it taps my anger, which I think is the antidote. Like when you feel sad or fearful about the state of the world, which we certainly all do nowadays, perhaps even more so than when we were 15, because now we're grown and we know what some of the things mean that before we only felt, but now we know, right? I think tapping into the kind of anger that she has to use our rage productively, I think is very helpful at this time, because we can't just ignore how angry we are, and we shouldn't be asked to set it down. We can do things with it. And they don't have to be murderous things. They don't have to be riotous things. Most of us, I think, are feeling too old to get up in the streets and march with the children a lot of the time, but that doesn't mean that our rage is any less valuable. It may even be more valuable because it comes from a longer history and an experience of knowing how it used to be, how it is now, and what a slim margin of error there is between those two generations, And so, the sound of it helps me tap in, disperse the fog, and also just the righteousness of her anger. I feel the righteousness of my own anger.
Thank you.
Megan?
I'm supposed to deliver a message from B&T that says lots and lots of love and lots of hugs, and they miss your faces. They do. I already sent them some pictures, so I need some more.
We ready to wrap? We ready to wrap?
Is everything really gonna be fine, fine, fine?
Yes. Look. It already is. We're here right now doing this, and that is fine, fine, fine. But also, fine, fine, fine is a thing that we are at all times swimming in, which is like, it's so big that maybe we struggle to see it a lot of the time, but like it's not, to be fine is not a condition that is in the future. It's not what is possible in some later time if you only make the right moves or the right choices. We are fine right now. Right now. So yes. We will be because we are, because all things are one thing. Enjoy the book.